listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, what's going on? Hope you're doing great, and thanks for checking out my podcast, Straight to Video, episode 297, no less. And if you've been with us all the time, thank you so much. And if you're new, thanks again. It's great to have you on board. Now, on today's show, I chat with blues rock guitarist and singer-songwriter Albert Cummings. And what a treat it was. Learning of Albert's journey as he checks in with us from his hometown of Williamstown, Massachusetts is fascinating. For those in the know, Albert is one of the most soulful and original blues guitar players on the scene. And upon hearing his playing or seeing him perform, you would think he'd been doing this all his life, but that's not actually the case. Being a fourth-generation builder, Albert was all set to, and to be honest, has followed in his family's footsteps of a building career, which he still does today. In fact, he took a break from it to talk to us, but it wasn't until his late 20s that he even stepped on a stage with a band. From that moment, he knew it was a calling, and from there, he would head out on tour with the likes of B.B. King, and even perform and record with the legendary Double Trouble, the rhythm section of the great Stevie Ray Vaughan. We chat all about this and how he's approached his career in a really fun and insightful talk, which I hope you're gonna love. As always, this Straight to Video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. Affinity Photo is used to create the podcast episode artwork you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market, so please check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, let's do this. If you want to learn more about Albert, his career and incredible guitar playing, then you can find everything at albertcummings.com, and be sure to check out his latest album Strong, which is out now, and look out for live dates here in the UK later this year. But for now, please enjoy my Straight to Video talk with Albert Cummings.
Hey, Rob.
How's it going, Say? Are you all right?
Doing good. I'm going to tell you, I always hate to do interviews or anything with sunglasses on, but let me show you my eye, man. I got a piece of stone chip in my eye. I was working with some stone. My whole eye's all swelled up, so I don't want to look like a freak show, so I'm going to put sunglasses on if that's all right.
I can tell you something. You're in good company. I did an interview a while ago with Susie Quattro. She fell on her patio like a few hours before. She had like the big black eye, so she was wearing sunglasses as well. So it's fine. It's all good.
Yeah, it drives me crazy when people wear sunglasses on stage. It's like, you know.
How's your day going otherwise?
It's going great. Going great. Yeah, we got some good weather.
Whereabouts are you at the moment?
I'm in my hometown. It's called Williamstown, Massachusetts, in the upper left-hand corner of Massachusetts.
Have you lived there your entire life?
I'm like one of the oldest families in this town. Yeah, fourth generation here, so been here forever. And it's still my favorite place on earth, which is pretty cool. And I'm probably biased to it, but it's very scenic. The Appalachian Mountains come through, and it's all, it's all old. Well, it's changing, you know what I mean? But it's like old buildings and just a lot of history here. But, I'm talking to the UK, so there's no history here at all. This is like minuscule. This is like a little drop in the bucket.
But what a cool home base to have, though. Now you're out touring more and stuff like that, to be able to come back to somewhere like that.
Yeah, no, it really is. I always love to come home. Even coming in on a plane, you start to see the mountains and you're like, okay, I'm getting close.
You're recently back from Ireland, though, I believe.
I was.
Performing at the Rory Gallagher tribute concert. How was that?
It was awesome. It turned out to be a one-off show. So I wish I could have spent some more time, but we had a blast. I mean, I love to go in Ireland. I love the people there, and everybody's just, I don't know, it just seems a much more real environment. Talk to somebody, they'll talk to you. They're friendly. Everybody's like, you get that. Well, at least in the Northeast in the United States, you get all these entitled people that are just like, can't even say hello to you. They bump into you,
Do you think that's a reflection of like social media now? Sometimes you'll like meet people online and they're really chatty and stuff. Then you'll meet them in real life and totally different person. And people aren't used to that real life connection anymore.
Sure. I think there's a lot of that has to do with that. But I think it's either you're a cool person or you're not, I guess. I don't know. Some people just, I don't know. A lot of people move up from the city here and you can't look at anybody in the city. So I think that's really what it is. I don't think they even know that us hillbillies are like friendly,
So have you been to Ireland before?
Yeah, like about a year and a half, I think, or maybe 2 years before. We spent like 2 weeks in Ireland and then another week and a half in the UK or something like that. It's just so breathtaking, every bit of it.
Have you hit Scotland yet?
I have not been to Scotland at all. But I always tell people, go where I get invited.
My friend runs the club called Bannerman's in Edinburgh. So that's a place place to...
Well, October, we're coming over and we've got to go to Penance. I want to play them all, man. I just, I'm really just starting this, honestly. I'm a fourth generation home builder that, I had two sons. And early on when I first started, I never played with a band until I was 27 and I'm 56 now. And I did my first album in 99 or 2000.
I love your story, man. I think it's super inspiring.
Yeah.
This whole journey. I mean, firstly, you're probably a shining light for parents who get terrified when the kids say they want to be in a band and they say, you need a backup trade. You're like the poster boy for that.
I'm the opposite. When you're out there and you're not 16 with a six-pack stomach and a, beautiful modelic face that they can make you into whatever they want to make you into. That's what the whole industry's set up on, So music business is like, I guess it's what teenage girls have their parents buy them. That's what sells for music, right? So I started at 27. That was like the age everybody dies.
Yeah, that's the number, right?
Yeah, that's the number. I start when I'm 27 years old. I had no idea of ever even considering this as something to do. My father was like, you're going to be a builder. You're the fourth. I'm Albert Cummings, the fourth.
Wow.
You're the fourth and you're going to be a builder and that's what you're going to be. And I had no idea I could do anything. The only other career that I even thought of at age 17, 18 when I graduated high school was music.
Because your dad played a little as well, though, right? So you was in that kind of environment.
Yeah, he did. He played kind of the big band area. He played in orchestras and he played in smaller bands. But, back then, can you imagine being a musician in the 50s and the 60s? That's all people had. There wasn't even, what are they going to go stay home and listen to the radio? They went out and saw a band and went dancing and there was gigs everywhere. My father said he'd do 3 or 4 gigs in a day on weekend. He was making good money doing that stuff. But he'd read music, and I never got into any of that stuff. I was either going to a construction school, which is where I went in Boston. I went to a school called Wentworth, which is a technical school. My father was like, oh, you don't need college. You just go to work.
Did you work with your dad?
Oh, yeah. I worked with him, and then we were partners for 6 years. And then he had a stroke and couldn't work anymore. But that's how that transition went. But he worked with his father, the same before that.
What's your sons doing?
Well, I have 2 sons. One's going to hit 24 in 3 or 4 days, and one is 27, and he'll be 28 in October. And my oldest son started his own excavation company. So we're keeping him busy doing all the other stuff. And my youngest is just graduated from college from Coastal Carolina. He's moving to Miami, and, he's moving to probably the most expensive place to live in the United States. So I guess he'll have to figure it out.
What do they think of dad with this music career? They think it's cool?
They don't think too much of it. You know what I mean? I'm just dad to them. And, people in my town, they know me as Albert the Builder. I'm just Albert. Everybody kind of knows at least of me, or that sounds arrogant, but it's a tiny town. So you mentioned Albert Cummings. If you get your name in, we don't even have a newspaper around here anymore, but you get your name in the paper and everybody knows who you are. So the further I go away from the town, the more better I am known for music, because I don't really play around. I mean, there's a couple musicians around here, but this isn't a music mecca. I always joke and say blues is more of a state of mind around here than it is a type of.
But like I say, your whole journey, it's really cool. And I want to introduce people who are listening to a couple of the events that triggered that, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
Tell me about the day you were in Boston at college and stumbled upon a certain tour bus.
I still remember this right to the T, man. It was like, I'd go out by myself and walk around Boston when I was down there because it's bored, and you could, you walk 15 minutes and you could be on the other end of the city. Boston's a small town. You can walk better than you can drive there. So I was walking up, I think it's Boylston Street, I should know, but came in front of the Orpheum Theater. There was this tour bus with this Gibson Les Paul and a Fender Strat crossed on the side, and no name on the bus, And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because I really was just a few chords on guitar. I was just fooling around with guitar. There was one window where you could buy tickets, and there was this one little sign above it that said Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. And I was like, oh my God, that's the guy I've been listening to. This was somewhere in that winter of 85, 86, somewhere in there. I was like all excited, and I went back to the dorm, and I'm like, hey, anybody want to go see Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble? Like, Stevie who? Nobody knew who he was. I'd been listening to him since I don't know when he first really came out, 83, 82, 81, something like that.
What role your buddies listening to at the time, do you reckon?
Oh, Aerosmith and AC/DC and whatever. I didn't even know who those bands were. I had no sense of anything. I remember I had a drummer down the hall from me. I think his name was Bruno, and his whole dorm room was a drum set. He had one of those drum sets from...
like Rush, Neil Peart or something.
Yeah, they just filled up the whole room. And I remember we also used to go to hear him play Phil Collins. Boom, 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 right? So we'd be like, oh, that's so cool, you can do that. So nobody wanted to go with me. So I was like, I can't not go to this. I got to go see if this guy's real, because there's no way anybody could play guitar like that. You know what I mean? You still hear him today. You're like, oh my God, he's so far above any of us. I don't care who's out there. Everybody, I can do this. And no, you can't. You can't do any of that stuff. He was above anything that I've ever seen. And I remember I went to the show by myself and I sat there, and I remember he came out in a big chief Indian headdress. You know, he'd be thrown out of the industry now if he did that. But he came out and just started wailing on that thing. And I remember him throwing it up in the air, and I remember him standing on it and grabbing the neck and bending it. It was just like, oh my God. And I was, you know, as a kid, I started playing 5-string banjo because I couldn't fit my hand around a guitar. So I got pretty good with that. But by the time college came along, I was like, nobody else gets this.
Unless you're Steve Martin or something like that.
Yeah, you're Steve Martin. I mean, today it's bluegrass and these other types of music. It's popular more now. But back then it was like total hillbilly. You know what I mean? It was like the girls would all make fun of me and stuff. It wasn't a very smart choice. But anyway, so when I saw Stevie and I watched the whole show, and I remember walking out all by myself. And I remember getting to the stairway to walk down out of that place. And I remember Goodbye Banjo. That's all was on my head.
Game changer.
Yeah, it was a game changer. It was really like, it just inspired me. But I didn't realize, because if it was 86, I wasn't even 19 then. I was still 18 years old. So I never played with a band till I was 27. So that inspiration just stuck with me. Again, I had no idea of music ever happening in any way.
Had you been to many live shows prior to that one?
I saw Hank Williams Jr., and I saw Waylon Jennings. I used to go to a lot of bluegrass festivals because of the banjo and stuff. So I got to meet Bill Monroe one night. You know, as a kid, I snuck backstage, and, you know, me and my buddy snuck back, and I got his autograph. All the greats like Tony Rice and all these players. But I never really, I guess I could say, it sounds terrible, but the respect for the bluegrass guitar players. But now that I get into that stuff, and I realize flat picking is one of the most difficult and complex, yet it's simplified movements that make these sounds. But oh my God, those players are like, yeah, you know, Stevie couldn't do that stuff. You know what I mean? It was like everybody has their own talents in their own little area.
How did that change for you then? Because obviously you've been playing the banjo, then you go to the electric guitar after seeing Stevie. Did your technique help with that?
I think it kind of came a little later. Like when I learned how Freddie King would play, Freddie would use his lower fingers. He actually wore finger picks. And he had a thumb pick and everything, you know. And when I first started to learn guitar, I didn't have any idea of using the others. And the progressions, you know, like the banjo lick is 3-2-5-1, 4-2-5-1. That's like, you know, you just sit there and do that all day. But that doesn't work on a guitar. You know, there's only 3 strings on a banjo that are same as guitar, if I remember. And the rest is all different, totally different. So you could fool around on those 3 strings, but you needed the other strings to make anything sound sensible with rolls. But I think what it did is it cut my teeth to be able to start moving my fingers. And I think that was important for me to start that when I was younger, to have as a skill later. And I don't know that to be true, but I hear a lot of guys that will come and they're older and they're like, well, I wanted to start playing guitar. I was like, well, start playing guitar. He's like, I can't get my fingers to move. It's like, well, you know, I think if you just work at it, you will. But when you're young and you do something, it's not so intimidating anymore, maybe, you know? So I think it helped. And then I started to look into Freddie King a little bit. He would pluck those things. And then, you know, after I learned that, I'm like, oh, that's how Stevie did that. That's how Stevie got the Albert King tone, because Albert would not finger rolling, but he would pluck. He'd pull those strings, and it gives you a whole different tone than with a pick.
I love that you stumbled upon that rather than like today. Someone would probably tell you that on YouTube, how Stevie Ray Vaughan got his sound.
Yeah, you had to stumble. And I've forgotten a lot more than I ever know. You know what I mean? Because I'm not a guy that sits and plays guitar every day for 2 hours. I'm usually working. You know, I'm usually building something. You know, I rarely get a chance to practice, and I'm usually too tired to do it. And
I love this.
I like to go on tour, and, you know, by the 3rd, 4th, 5th show, I start to get, hey, I'm getting into this now. I'm starting to come around.
This Stevie Ray Vaughan concert, it sets you on this path of like really diving into the electric guitar. But like you mentioned, it'd be almost 10 years later before you even get on a stage and perform. Strangely, a wedding as well, which you were actually dragged up. You didn't want to do.
The only wedding gig I ever played at was that one song. Well, I guess I can't say that because my song Beautiful Bride was the first time I performed publicly at all. Before I ever played with a band, I got married when I was 21 years old, and I sang Beautiful Bride. I wrote that song and played it at my wedding for my wife. That was really the first time. As far as playing with a band, I was 27 years old.
Was it electric? Did you feel like electricity through your body when you played with a band? Nothing like you'd felt before?
totally grabbed me by the collar and said, you need to pay attention to this. It was like, there was no doubt that this was something I had to look into. It called to me so much. It wasn't like, oh, that was fun. That was great. Yeah. I was like, I got to figure out how to do this. And it was that moment that made me start to pick up a guitar and start to try to figure it out.
Right.
And I still haven't figured it out. I mean, that thing's endless. Nobody can master a guitar. I've had people call me a master. I'm like, give me a break. Try Spanish guitar on, try jazz, try country licks, try something. Anybody thinks they can master guitar is insane. Any instrument, really. I mean, it just, I don't think we live long enough to ever master them all.
So from this point, I think, did you form the band Swamp Yankee? Great name.
Yeah, I did.
Was this the band which had your 9th grade English teacher as your drummer?
No, that was actually, well, yes, it was the band, but I have a CD that's called Albert Cummings and Swamp Yankee, the first CD I did, and it wasn't that drummer.
Okay.
But the first rendition of that band was my English teacher.
Did he answer an ad, or did you like, I remember my English teacher used to play drums?
So the same night that I played guitar, another guy got up that I didn't know at the time. He got up and played some piano with the band at the same time as us. He says, hey, I play guitar too, man. Why don't we get together and play a little bit? So we did that for like a year. We'd get together every Thursday night, teach each other things. And, we were both beginning on it. Then another friend called or whatever and said, hey, we got this party and can you be the band? And we were like, we don't have a band. They're like, well, what do you mean? Well, I said, we don't have a drummer or anything. And she said, well, can you get one? And then Phil Rimmeler was the original guy that I played with. And he said, well, I know Bill Palmy, and that was the drummer.
Oh, Mr. Palmy, my English teacher.
Mr. Palmy, yes. He was a speed read teacher, and he wasn't very effective on me, so I'm pretty slow. We got together, had a couple of full rounds and got together and did a gig. I still have a picture of the first time I ever played that, the first gig that I ever did under my own band name. And it was called Swamp Yankee. And we were hanging out in a little pub in town called the Purple Pub. One of my buddies had come home from high school and he was kind of a creative type, literally a genius, this kid. But he's a crazy genius, I said, I'm trying to think of a band name. What do you got? And he's like, Swamp Yankee. And I was like, what does that mean? He says, it means white trash. I'm like, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Did you ever have a logo?
Yeah, I had a logo, this like alligator playing a guitar and all this stuff. We had shirts made. We had these T-shirts made called Swamp Yankee in the beginning. I wish I could get my hands on one of those.
Bring it back. Next tour, UK tour.
So we went with that for a while, and then Bill couldn't play anymore, or Phil didn't want to play. So I had to start switching it. And around here, there's no musicians. I'm still switching musicians today. I'm still looking for the right, I find them, but they're hooked into this, until this.
Everybody's playing in several bands these days.
Yeah, it's just the way it is. So it doesn't bother me anymore. It's just kind of what it is. So eventually I got sick and tired of different renditions. And then it was still kind of the Swamp Yankee thing. And then I was just like, all the great players, it's B.B. King, Stevie Ray Vaughan. It's all just the guy. And I was like, well, I just got to pick a direction and go there.
It's always going to be you there, regardless of who else is there. So.
Yeah. So I just started to go under Albert Cummings. It wasn't long after that I got touring with B.B. King. And then I became really good friends with B.B. King. And I used to sit with him backstage. And one night we were talking and we got talking about his nephew was going to be late for the gig. Walter was going to be late. And I can't remember the saxophone player come in and said, I heard from Walter. He's not sure if he's going to make the gig or not. And B.B. says to him, well, he says, if he doesn't make the gig, you tell him to keep on walking. I remember him saying that. And he turns to me and he says, that's why I call it B.B. King, because if my band doesn't show up, I know I'm going to show up and I will fulfill the contract. Forever since, it's always been, there's no question it's Albert Cummings. I don't have to worry about anything else.
Man, love that. But what I'm interested in, though, is not only do you find this guitar style late on, what about your voice as well? Was that another thing to overcome, confidence-wise?
Totally.
Was you always confident in the way you sang?
No, I mean, I hated the sound of my voice. I think most people do, when they hear it, they're like, I can't stand my voice. And I think you got to learn to love your own voice, maybe. You got to use what you got. So I think I had something earlier on that I was able to kind of sing a little bit. And if you're in the music business, I mean, there's thousands of guitar players that maybe in the high 90%, they can't sing a note. They just can't sing. I mean, they do try to sing, but they just can't sing. I don't know. It's a hard thing to learn to express yourself with your guitar. That's the hardest thing. I don't know. I might sound crazy about it, but it's I think that's where I see the weaknesses in players that I try to help. Are you got to be able to communicate through that thing like it's a Morse code system, like you're trying to talk to somebody with that thing. This is something you have to like learn to express your feelings through. And I think that's harder with a voice because now you don't have anything to hide behind. I mean, it sounds crazy, right? I'm hiding behind a guitar while I sing, or I'm behind a mic stand. At least I experienced that. I have this. I don't have to stand there and just hold a mic and belt it out because it's just you. It's just you in that audience. You got to have a self-confidence in yourself that's just, this is how I'm going to sing, and this is what I'm going to say, and this is how I want to say it. And every song is different. You can't sing the same. There's so much to it. It's all simple, but there's a lot of little things you got to figure out and line up to make it come out right. I'm in the blues world, but I'm a rock blues country guy. I guess if you know what I mean, I'm not a traditional blues guy. I'm not a Lightning Hopkins or anything, you know what I mean? And I'm not trying to be. I don't want to be anybody. I want to be me. If I can be me, then I can be free. It's really what it is. And you can't be free if you're trying to be something else, you know? I've always said there's two types of players. I guess singers would fall into this category too, but there's performers and there's creators. And performers perform what the creators created. And creators are a very small percentage. And I'm not dissing anybody or anything because I am not a cover band. I can't go out and play everything. I mean, I know guitar players that they can be like, oh, that's this pedal and it's set to this. They can hear that and they can dial in tones to play certain songs. I have no clue. I'm lucky if I can get, I mean, my pedals, I don't even need the stupid things. I use them. I don't know why. I hate them. I have these certain pedals. I switch them every week. I'm just a nut with them. And my best gigs are when my board doesn't work and I just play it straight. I never switch, you know? I got to have that little speck of delay in there. And I got to have a little more reverb. And I got to have this little booster.
Have you seen that YouTube video with that guy from the UK analyzing your playing?
A long time ago, he did that, right?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of years ago. Yeah, I watched that today. That's great. He's talking about the delay and stuff with you playing as a three-piece. It just kind of fills that space a little bit. And he goes deep on that as well. Yeah,
well, that's cool. I did watch that years and years ago, and I should watch it again because you don't see a lot of people trying to figure my stuff out. And I just, you know, you got to be popular for that to happen, really.
That video's got some views as well.
It does?
Yeah.
How many times did you watch it?
No, not me. So tell us about how you brought Stevie Ray Vaughan's band Double Trouble into your world, because you were playing some gigs around Albany, I believe, right?
Yeah. So like I said, I'm in this little town and there's no place to play around here. And what there was, there's even less now. Just no venues. I mean, you're lucky if you could get an acoustic gig in a corner of a bar with all the sports teams on the, you know, TVs or something. Nobody sees music as a form of entertainment around. It's sad. So Albany, New York is about an hour from us. Yeah, it's a pretty big city compared to this area. It's the biggest city we have around us. Boston's 3 hours, Albany's an hour. So I started to go to Albany and I found out there was like a blues jam every Sunday night. I took the band and I was like, we're going over there on a Sunday night and we're going to play. You know, we went over there and we played and it was like, everybody's just looking at us. Oh my God, who is this guy? Where did he come from? How we've never heard of this guy, blah, 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 that type of thing. So bingo, 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 things started to open up. We started going to Albany every weekend, you know, and then I'd be back in work Monday morning.
Did you ever play at a place called Valentine's?
I never was big enough for Valentine's. I always wanted to play Valentine's. I never got there. I don't know if it's still there.
I got some friends from Albany and we've been there before and they always play Valentine's.
Yeah. That's like, I could never get a gig at Valentine's. I mean, there was places around here that I never could get a gig at either. It was like, it's funny, you know, but they got to know about you. That's the music world. If they don't know about you, then you're no good. It doesn't have any reflection on your talents or anything else. Music is a popularity game from every level.
But Albany accepted you.
Yeah, Albany. So then I played the Blues Fest, you know, and then I won the blues competition and I went down to Memphis for that. And anyways, so there's a school called RPI, which is Rensselaer Polytech, and it's like the MIT of New York. It's a really, really top school for tech school. They have this place called the RPI Fieldhouse, and they used to have concerts there, and they had every major event you could have in this place is what they'd have. And the last place I saw Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble play was the RPI Fieldhouse. So one day, a promoter calls me and he says, hey, the RPI wants to do a blues day, and they want you to be the local talent. And they wanted me to ask, who do you think we should get for a national headliner? And I just jokingly off the whim, I said, well, why don't you get Double Trouble to come play with me? And he's like, well, that's a great idea. Let me see what I can do. So I had to send out that little CD that I was talking about, the Swamp Yankee CD. And I had to send that to Austin, Texas. I was thinking, there's no chance. There's no way. There's no way that it ever happened. But like 2 weeks later, they came back, yes, they'll do the gig. And I was like, oh my God, I was so scared. So literally the next time I walked into the RPI Fieldhouse, since seeing Stevie Ray Vaughan Double Trouble, I was now fronting Double Trouble. Then there's a place called Saratoga, New York. It's north of there. I don't know if you know that, but that's famous for horse racing. I've been playing all these other places. So I was able to book another gig that night because it was an afternoon gig. So we played that gig at that night. And then after the gig, I mean, it was a sold out, packed house. Of course, Double Trouble's in town, and I was driving them home and I don't know, 2:00 in the morning. And they're like, Albert, what we heard on your CD and what we just heard tonight, this is nuts. You need to do a record. And I was like, well, I want to do a record, but I have no idea how that works. They said, well, we do. And we want you to come to Austin, Texas. We want to produce your record and we want to play on it.
Man, that is like fairy tale.
Yeah, literally this was at 2:30 in the morning, something like that. And I remember I was driving down the main road that goes up to Canada out of Albany is called 87. And I was driving down 87 South and I had to get off in Troy, New York is where the gig was. And I drove 2 exits by it. Because I was just like stunned. I was just like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm sitting in the car with my idols and they just asked me to come to Austin and felt like such a doof. I was like, sorry guys, I just drove like 20 minutes past our exit. I got to turn around. I know you want to get to bed.
How'd you rehearse for those gigs? Or was it just like throw and go, like be ready or go home?
Oh, well, that was even scarier because they got in the night before and they wanted to do a little quick rehearsal. So we show up in this little place. I don't even know where it was. I mean, it wasn't even a practice area or anything. It was somebody's building or something. And we set up and they started jamming on some Hendrix song. And I sat there like an idiot, kind of looking at me. I was like, I don't even know what you're playing. I don't know anything about it. At this time, I was brand new to it. I had no idea. But somebody could go start into a Hendrix song now. Unless it's Voodoo Child or a couple other songs. I don't sit and study anybody, and I just don't. I mean, it's great. Hendrix is Hendrix. I love Hendrix stuff. They looked at me like, what is this? And Tommy told me later, Tommy and I became really close friends and still are. And he told me, he said, that night we showed up and you couldn't play any Hendrix. We looked at each other like, what the hell did we get ourselves into? So it was like, but what was cool is that when we hit the gig the next day, kind of went over my songs and whatever else I had at the time. And Tommy had showed up. He had some foot surgery or something. He was in a full leg cast up to his knee. And I was like, in preparation, I was like scared to death. I'm like watching Live at the Melcombo. I was like watching any video I could of these guys to know what I'm going to be expecting on stage with them because I'm about to play with my idols and I ought to know something. So what I noticed on all the videos is they're very calm. Stevie's doing all the motions and Tommy's usually just, Tommy's the best bass player in the world for that. Just holding down, Tommy was the Stevie Ray of bass. Those two belong together. And Chris is just such a great drummer. Chris would just always maybe a little smile and he'd be playing his stuff. And I looked around. I didn't have the gumption to look around until like the third song. And I looked around and Chris has got this huge smile on his face. And Tommy's dancing with a cast. So I'm like, this is going pretty good. This is going pretty good. It was just one of those things that I love when something scares me because anything that frustrates or scares you is a good thing. I look at it as like, that is great because something just changed in me. Something, when I overcome that, something just changed and made me a different person than I was before that happened. So I love those type of experiences because when something scares me, I'm usually more interested because I know it's like, oh, this is out of my comfort zone, which has to grow you as a human being.
100%. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
You guys like totally hit it off and you recorded the album from the heart. When was the last time you listened to those recordings? Because all those feelings must come flooding back.
They do. They do. Once in a while, something will come on or I'll, I don't even have a CD player anymore. My truck doesn't even have one. I hate it. And I have not listened to it from the heart in a long, long time. But every time I listen to it, I want to re-sing the album. Because what I hear mostly is I hear where I was on guitar. And of course, how many guitarists does it take to change a light bulb, right? 101, one to change a light bulb and 100 to tell them how they would have done it better. But when I listen to myself, I do the same thing to myself. I'm like, oh, I should have done, I wish I did, But I look at it as it's just a photograph, which is, it's an audio recording of what I was doing.
Snapshot of time.
That's all it is. Totally. You can hear me evolve in all my records, I think. At least I can. I know myself, so I can hear it. So I listen to it. I can usually get by on the guitar. I'm like, I'm a much different player now than I'd love to go do that now. But it was that experience that made me into the guy that I am. People tell me all the time, man, you should have done this when you were 18 instead of 40 or whatever. People tell me, I was like, I couldn't have done that at 18 with who I am right now. Especially when you're trying to, blues to me, like what draws me to blues is an expression of your feelings. So if you're not expressing your feelings while you're playing, you're just a performer. You're just performing that stuff. If you're like out there going for it, and I don't mean a million, the little Italy notes, you know what I mean? Like guitar players that do the little Italy notes, they're like, little Italy. It's like, I don't care your ability. I don't care anything about anything. I want to know what you're thinking, how you're feeling. There's all these things you got to work out. You got to figure all these little things out. Like you watch a band, you watch a guitar player take a solo on a sad song. He's doing some happy solo. He doesn't understand the message of the song. It's like an actor in a part. The actor, if he's a good actor or she's a good actress or actor, I guess is the proper term, you believe the part no matter what you've seen them in prior. You believe who that person is in that part. And it's the same for musicians. They have to like literally every song is a different message, theme, mood, everything about it. And every one of those, you have to now get into that mode. And that's the mode you got to come from. You can't play a happy solo over a sad song or vice versa. People look at you like, hey, did I leave the coffee pot on? Let's go. We got to go home. You don't draw them in.
It's interesting you say that when people say, oh, you should have done this a while ago. How was it for you being like the new guy on the scene at around 30 years old? Did you ever feel at place, maybe imposter syndrome, or was that something of a blessing as you already had like a life experience to draw on for your songs?
Yeah, well, sure. When you're older, people, they tend to look, the whole system is set up for youth. Wow, it's not in the blues.
Yeah.
It's not. And I'm not dissing young players. Some of these kids now are like, every city's got the prodigy. Sometimes they got 5 or 6 of them, and they've all watched YouTube, and they can play all this stuff, and it's all this great stuff, and it's great, but it's all performance to me. That kid doesn't even know who he is, who his self is, or who she is. It doesn't mean they're bad players or they're playing bad music. It's just, I always say, well, can't wait to hear them in like 10 years, when they get a little mileage on and life gives them rewards and kicks them in the butt. It changes them, and it changes that music, and it allows them to like hopefully communicate through that instrument, which is where that sixth sense come from, I think, in music. That's just like, wow, I can totally hear what you're telling me right through that guitar. You don't have to say a word. I can hear your mood. So there's my 2 cents.
But like you say, with the blues, though, it's kind of different. It's like when you turn up on the scene, people are saying, where's this guy come from? Why haven't we heard about him?
Yeah, well, that's still the case. Until this podcast, I've been the biggest secret there is. So, you're letting the cat out of the bag.
Man, your story is something out of a storybook. It would make a great movie. Who could play you in a film?
Yeah, I don't know. I have a hard enough time getting a gig. I don't think I got to worry about a movie deal. No, I'm still, it's like for me, I'm just to the point in my life where I'm able to go and have fun with my music and pursue it. And that happened early on when I first started getting it. I remember I went out with B.B. King. I was out for 6 weeks once, and my youngest was like 8. And I came back and I noticed that he had grown like a quarter of an inch, and I missed it. And it really bothered me. And I was like, brakes are on. I just figured my kids needed their dad more than I needed that music. That's how I've honestly thought about it. So now they're both grown. One's moving away. It's almost an empty nest. You know what I mean? It's close. So I can go do whatever I want. My sons, they're happy for me to do whatever I want. I go wherever I want. It's my time to start back up. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, so now what do I do? So now I got to figure out a way to get people aware of me. So that's why I appreciate you doing this podcast. I mean, if there's people listening, great. I want to come meet you. But I realize I got to work at it to be able to earn that right. You know what I mean? I'm on this kind of long, steady road of building it. I come from a building background. Everything has to be, one brick at a time, but that has to be properly placed or you'll be tearing that brick out. And music's a tough one. Music business is a tough one. The playing is easy. You know what I mean? The touring is, you get out there, it all looks, we always joke, it all looks so glamorous, right?
Yeah, that hour is. That hour on stage is.
Yeah, and Double Trouble told me that when I went to Austin the first time. They said being a rock star is great for like an hour a day, and the rest of it's hell. And I was like, wow, how could you even say that? That's what it looks like from the outside. But it's hard work. And I come from a construction world, you know what I mean? Yeah, I could dig a trench for 8 hours and come home less exhausted than what music will do to you.
How crazy is that?
And then throw a bad gig on top of that for your own mental psyche and all the stuff that goes with it. But eventually you get in a pattern. And I think I'm in a pattern where it's just like, I don't pay attention to critics. And I remember B.B. King, another conversation I had with him, we talk about critics. He said, well, he got to have a job too. That was his statement about it. It's like, and then I remember Chris Slayton from Double Trouble telling me earlier, well, if you believe all the good, you got to believe all the bad. And it's so true. If you're paying attention to that stuff, you're not paying attention to what you're trying to do. And again, it goes back to that saying, if I want to be free, I've got to be me. It just makes it so much nicer, because when I did the Double Trouble thing in the beginning, oh my God, I got killed, because guitar players aren't jealous types, are they? I mean, I'm sitting there. I record. It was the first time they brought Reese in. It was the first artist they did a whole album with since Stevie Ray.
People were there with their arms crossed when they hit play on that CD player.
Oh my God, they're like, he's no Stevie Ray. He's trying to be Stevie Ray. He sucks, blah, blah. I'm not trying to be Stevie. I'm still not trying to be Stevie Ray. I mean, I listen to Stevie's stuff. I'm like, I can't play that stuff. He's just such a monster. People will relate me to that. And I've had people say, oh man, you sound just like Stevie Ray. And I was like, well, I just say, thank you, whatever. I wouldn't tell them but what I'm really thinking is, well, first of all, you're a complete idiot, because I'm not Stevie Ray in any way. I couldn't even I'd be lucky to fill the air in the tires on his tour bus. Maybe. That's the level I am at with Stevie Ray, is where I see it. And secondly, I don't want to sound like Stevie Ray. So you kind of just hurt my feelings, because I don't want to sound like Stevie Ray. I don't want to be Stevie Ray. I just want to be me. So if you're telling me I'm sounding too much like Stevie, then I'll back off playing Stevie's style. But that's what's in me. But whatever. It's all meant as a compliment. And I mean, I just want to be myself. That's it. And my favorite quote of all times, be yourself, because everybody else is taken.
Man, you have got some great sayings. What's your other one? If you're thinking, you're stinking.
Yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it too. If you're sitting there thinking about what you're playing, you're not communicating with that audience in any way.
You got a list of them. I love it. Albert, I'll let you go, but it's been a pleasure to speak to you, man.
Has 40 minutes gone already? Wow. Yeah, I get talking about this stuff. I love it. Appreciate it so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much to Albert Cummings for joining me on this week's Straight to Video podcast. What a story, and such a cool guy. To keep up to date with everything he's got going on, then visit albertcummings.com. So over at our 80s video shop in Overton, Derbyshire, just 10 minutes from junction 28 of the M1, we're going to be having a birthday celebration next Sunday on the 28th of July to mark 2 years of the shop. The event is free and runs from 12 noon until 4 p.m, and our special guest will be none other than movie poster artist Paul Shipper, who was just on the show. Paul will be swinging by the shop to talk about his career creating posters for some of the biggest movie franchises of all time, selling prints and answering your questions, so I really hope some of you can join us. So that's all for this week's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we'll come back next Friday for a brand new show. But till then, please make sure to always be kind. Please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.